Notre Dame came up just short in the national title back in January, but since then, they have completely reloaded with a new staff, major upgrades in the transfer portal, and a top 5 recruiting class. So now that fall camp is in full swing, the big question is, did Notre Dame win the offseason? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is great to have you here with me on Monday, August 4th, and thank you for getting your work week started by making this your first watch or listen of the day. Before we get rolling, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow wherever you get your podcasts. We are officially back in season mode. New episodes dropping every weekday at 7 a.m. Eastern, and the best way to stay up to date is by subscribing to the show. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Notre Dame is in the thick of fall camp right now, and the media will get another look at practice on Wednesday. But before we dive back into the day-to-day updates, I wanted to zoom out and look at everything that's happened since the Irish walked off the field in Atlanta, because when you look at the big picture with the coaching changes, the additions in the transfer portal, and the 2026 recruiting surge, I think this has been far and away the most productive offseason under Marcus Freeman, and arguably for the program as a whole in a long, long time. So I'm bringing in Greg Flammang from Irish Sports Daily to break it all down. Did Notre Dame win the offseason? And how does this momentum heading into fall camp compare to previous years? Let's get into it. All right, joining me now is a great friend of the show, Greg Flammang from Irish Sports Daily. Greg, we've officially made it through the offseason, and a lot has happened since the loss to Ohio State in the national championship game. So now that the dust is settled, I've got one very important question for you. Did Notre Dame win the offseason?
You'd have to say yes, right? I mean, the vibes are as good as they've ever been. I think there are a lot of ways they could have lost the offseason, right? When you lose Chad Bowden, which was the first one, where it was just kind of like you lose him to USC, and then he was kind of talking trash to Notre Dame, or about Notre Dame, like in the media and that sort of thing. Who do you replace him with? They lost Al Golden. Who do you replace him with? Could have lost Mike Mickens, right? That was kind of a thing that was going on for a little bit there. Didn't lose him. Replaced Chad Bowden with Mike Martin from the Detroit Lions, and that's gone really well. And then Chris Ash has kind of been a good hire. There's been a lot of positive vibes about him as well. So I think on that front, Notre Dame, dodged some bullets there in terms of some bad press and some kind of negative momentum. And then obviously the recruiting has been going really well. And then Marcus Freeman, he does a good job of, he doesn't cause, big waves in the media. When he does do media, it's always something positive. I mean, people are always saying like how likable he is. So, Notre Dame did have one injury. They didn't lose a bunch of key players to the portal, which could happen as well. It's safe to say like they've had a really good offseason, and it looks like they're ready to build on what they did last year.
Right, and I think that positive momentum from the offseason has carried into fall camp, and stuff that doesn't even pertain to this team, like the success that Notre Dame has had on the recruiting trail has fans even more excited for this season, and those two things aren't really related to each other. Getting Joey O'Brien to commit does not mean that they're going to win more games in this upcoming season, but the vibes are high, and this time of year, there's always going to be excitement going into the season. I was really excited going into the 2016 season. I had no idea what was about to happen. I don't remember the offseason in 2007 a whole lot because I was 11 years old, but I'm sure I was excited when that happened as well. We're all very excited going into this season. We're all very excited going into last season, and that optimism proved to be warranted despite, a little hiccup in week 2 of last year. But how would you describe your feelings about this team heading into fall camp compared to previous years?
I think you just look at the overall roster and it feels a lot deeper. It feels a lot more talented. I was talking to my co-host Jamie Ueyama on Hit and Hustle today, which is, I guess, Thursday. We're
releasing this on Monday.
Releasing a little bit later. But I was talking to him on our reaction show to the opening of fall camp, and I was just saying, you look at the team photo and how many, frontline guys that they have on the roster that you just didn't have that many in, recent history, right? Like you had a bunch of key players, but you got guys like Tay Johnson he's not even running first team safety and he's making a bunch of huge plays. You've got guys like obviously Jeremiah Love and Shadarian Price. You've got Eli Raridan. You've got a guy like Malachi Fields, who's a big body, right? Like is an athletic body. You look at Notre Dame's secondary. Leonard Moore looks like a first-round pick. I mean, Adon Schuler looks good. The linebackers, I mean, someone like Preston Zinter, who we thought he could be in previous years, he could be a Greer Martini type who's playing a ton of snaps for Notre Dame, which isn't to say anything bad about Greer Martini, but it's hard for Preston Zinter to get on the field at linebacker. So they move him to the defensive line where maybe he could, get a shot at defensive end and rushing the passer, right? But you've got Jaden Osbury, you've got Jalen Sneed, you've got Drake Bowen, you've got Kingston Viliamuasa, you've got Madden Faremo, who looks really good as a freshman. How's he going to get on the field, right? Like there's so much talent that Marcus Freeman has acquired. And you just look at that and you say, yes, the quarterback is a major question, right? If anyone's going to kind of look down on Notre Dame's chances in 2025, they're going to look at Notre Dame's quarterback situation. But when you look at the rest of the roster, there's an abundance of talent that Notre Dame has that hasn't been the case in previous years. And you kind of feel like overall talent wins the day. I mean, there's been questions in the past about Georgia's quarterback. There's been questions in the past about Alabama's quarterback and who they're going to roll out there. The abundance of talent that those rosters had carried the day for them. And you kind of wonder, is that going to be the case at Notre Dame? And if they get over on this year, they've still got a young team. They've still got young talent moving forward. So you got to feel good about Notre Dame in 25. You got to feel good about Notre Dame in 2026 as well.
I think when Marcus Freeman had his first press conference after the first day of practice, he was clearly rejuvenated, excited about what he saw. And, people were asking him about the interceptions. I think it's totally fair to be concerned about that to some extent, but it's day one. And it just felt like he was so relieved to be back out there with the team. Mm-hmm. But with all this hype, with all this optimism, I think there is a fair amount of concern about how this team is going to handle success, because that has been an issue for this program. But it's typically been in season. This is a little bit different because there's so much optimism going into the season. So have you seen anything from Marcus Freeman, or has he said anything to you that sort of stands out in the way that he's trying to not necessarily temper expectations, but keep this team focused on the main thing? Because last year's success with that 2024 team doesn't necessarily carry over to this year. Like, this is a brand new group, and they have a lot to accomplish because, frankly, they haven't done anything yet because they haven't played a game.
Yeah, he made reference to it in the opening press conference when he said, I don't want to talk about 2024 anymore. Like, that was last year, and this is this year, and this is a new team. And I think he's very good at driving a message. He's very good at getting a theme that he wants to, kind of put out to the players, and he drives it. And I feel like that's going to be his main focus. This team hasn't accomplished anything. This team hasn't played a game yet. 2024 happened and that was great. That's not this year. And I think the fact that he brought it up in the opening press conference kind of lets you know, like, that's going to be a theme for him and a focus for him throughout fall camp. It's just like, we're not worried about what happened last year. We're not patting ourselves on the back. We got to get better. And he's constantly talking about elevating. He's constantly talking about reaching your full potential. And so I think internally, and, the way that he's built his Notre Dame football program, it's built to withstand something like a complacency and the players, feeling like, oh, they've already accomplished something, especially the returning players. It's built to withstand that. Now we'll see if it happens, right? That remains to be seen, but he's at least cognizant of it. You can tell because he brought it up in the preseason, or the first press conference of the new season.
Greg is going to be right back here with us in a second to take a look at how Marcus Freeman enhanced his coaching staff and personnel department over the offseason. But first, a word from 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. It's like when when your friend schedules that tee time at 6:30 in the morning, at first, it makes sense. You can get through a full 18 in the morning. The course is usually wide open, and then you have the rest of your day. But when the alarm goes off, you might feel some regret. That is, until you have a 5-hour energy. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. And the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. All right, let's go back to the very beginning of the offseason. The first big domino to fall was a negative one. Although Al Golden's departure wasn't a big surprise, it's still unfortunate, right? Like, he won the Broyles Award. The Notre Dame defense is a big reason why they even made it to the national championship. They were losing starters, and it didn't seem to matter. And Al Golden basically won every single matchup up until that final game against Ohio State when he went up against Chip Kelly, and also the fact that Ohio State probably had better players on that defense. But now, his replacement, Chris Ash, has been around for several months. We've already talked about him a little bit. How would you describe your confidence level in him stepping into this role in maintaining that defensive standard?
I think the good part is that they retained Mike Mickens, which it's not so much that Mike Mickens is a standalone great coach, so there's that aspect of it, but it keeps the rest of that staff intact, and that's important, right? Marty Biaggi, who is working with safeties, like he retains, he returns. Max Buller returns. Al Washington returns. So the core of the defensive coaches are all back, and I think that's important. Chris Ash has talked about keeping Notre Dame's, what they do on defense. He doesn't want to make wholesale changes to that, which is good, right? So those are the positives that I see from it, and that makes me feel good. The question that I have, and we won't have an answer to until they actually start playing games, is, it's one thing to have the playbook. It's another thing to be able to make the call that gets Notre Dame off the field consistently. And that was something that Al Golden was very good at in his second and third year, but not necessarily in his first year. Remember, they were not very good in the red zone. They were a terrible red zone team.
They were awful, yeah.
More than bad. They were the worst in college football in the red zone. And it's not to say that there's something that he's doing wrong, or there's something that the defense is doing wrong, or there's something structurally wrong, but maybe he just didn't have the secret sauce that he needed to get Notre Dame off the field in those situations. And you just wonder, does Chris Ash struggle with that, right? Does he want to deviate from what Notre Dame was doing a little bit from a play calling standpoint a year ago that was so successful for them? We're not going to know that until actual games are played. And so that's the question that I have. I think that Chris Ash is a good coach. I think he's been around some really good coaches. I think he's coordinated some really good defenses. But Notre Dame was really, really good on defense last year. And so it's hard to maintain that, right? It's not the easiest thing. Luckily for him, he's got some studs. Right, he's got some real players. That secondary looks elite. The linebacking crew looks elite. Notre Dame's defensive ends look elite. What can they get out of the rotation of 6 guys on the interior defensive line is going to be a big question as well. But he's got really good ingredients to work with. So that's going to be the question, is can he come up with the calls in the moments that gets Notre Dame off the field that they were so good at a year ago?
That's a great point about getting off the field, because it wasn't just the red zone in 2022. I literally just looked it up. Notre Dame finished 43rd in third down defense. Yeah. Last year, they finished 8th. And I think that they probably would have been ranked higher, but they played those additional games in the playoff. I think they were top 5 going into the college football playoff. So it wasn't just the red zone. They were able to get stops on third down as well. But retention is also a huge part of this as well. When you're talking about the offseason, sometimes no news is good news. Like, Mike Mickens not leaving wasn't a headline really in the moment. It just was a thing that happened. It's like, okay, great. Now Notre Dame brings back everyone else in their defensive staff except for Al Golden. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, they were able to retain Mike Denbrock. They were able to retain Joe Rudolph. I think Joe Rudolph had some suitors. They have Mike Brown back for year 2, but they had to replace running backs coach Dylan McCullough. He left to join the Las Vegas Raiders, but then by hiring Jaywan Sider from Penn State, that's probably the most exciting hire of the offseason. We've already seen Sider's impact in the recruiting trail by adding guys like Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton, but now that camp is here, where do you think we will see the biggest difference on the field now that Sider's in charge of the running backs?
I think the biggest difference might be in the rotations. Dylan McCullough loved specialized roles for his players. Obviously we remember, Devin Ford had a specialized role in Notre Dame's biggest game of the season in 2023 against Ohio State, right? Like it was Devin Ford and Jeremiah Love. They had a whole package, right? And so, that meant they weren't giving Audric Estime the ball, right? And a year ago, Aeneas Williams was Notre Dame's third down back. Jeremiah Love's coming out of the game on third down consistently, and everyone knew that was happening. They did it throughout the year in the biggest games of the season, right? They weren't afraid to do that. Is Jaywan Sider really going to do that with Jeremiah Love this year? I mean, obviously, they still have those players, right? Speaking of retention, they retained all of their running backs, which really no one expected. I mean, I think everyone assumed that one of Jabron Payne, Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young was going to leave the program just because of the so many numbers that Notre Dame has in that running back room, and they didn't leave, right? So how is he going to manage that when we know Dylan McCullough was going to give those guys roles? They were going to have specialized roles within the offense. We don't know that with Jaywan Sider. So that's going to be interesting to track. It was reported, Jamie Uyama observed during the observation period that Notre Dame had on their first practice, Jeremiah Love was getting a ton of work on the outside. That's going to be interesting, right? Like Penn State, where he came from, those running backs, they were running backs. They didn't do a ton of work in the slot. They did some, but not really. That's going to be interesting to track, is the development of Jeremiah Love as a wide receiver, getting him out there. Maybe they're going to see some two-back stuff. That's going to be interesting as well. But I think just the personnel usage is what I'm tracking with Jaywan Sider, which could be a major deviation from what Dylan McCullough did in his time at Notre Dame.
Losing Chad Bowden to USC stung for some fans, not all. As a matter of fact, you and I recorded a podcast on your show literally right after the news broke. We were planning on recording anyway, and that sort of just happened 5 minutes before we hit record. And I think you and I were on the same page at the time. It wasn't a total shock considering what happened the previous offseason where he sort of flirted with Michigan. But now that some time has passed, do you feel like Notre Dame is in a better place now with Mike Martin as the new general manager, but not just him, with the way that they have sort of reshaped the personnel department in the time since Bowden left?
I do think they are in a better position, not necessarily because of Chad Bowden's deficiencies or anything. It's just that Marcus Freeman had an opportunity. He had someone leave, right? And so he's always looking to enhance things. How does Notre Dame enhance things, right? He wanted to bring in someone who's more of a GM because of the way that college football is changing, right? You got to manage the salary now. You almost have a salary cap with the revenue sharing. You need to be able to manage those things. They've got Mike Martin handling that side of things. They've got Carter Allman who came in. I think Carter Allman, speaking of retention, again, he was a huge piece of Notre Dame. He might be the most underrated retained staffer in the entire program because of what he's been able to do. I mean, I don't know that they land Joey O'Brien without him. He's got a great relationship with Joey O'Brien, right? So I think retaining Carter Allman, getting Mike Martin in there, it seems to have really gelled. I mean, it went from who is Notre Dame landing at all in March, April to they have their opening official visits in June, and they land everybody. The only person they missed on was the tight end, who they didn't really miss on because they made a huge move with Ian Premer, who was the most sought after tight end that they was on their board. So I think it was the fact that Marcus Freeman, and he has been so good at this. And this is, again, I talk about things that Jack Swarbrick could not have known. Jack Swarbrick could not have known that Marcus Freeman was going to be able to make hires the way that he's been able to make hires. He replaces Dylan McCullough with Jaywan Sider. He retains Mike Mickens. He makes the Mike Martin hire, which was really not on anyone's radar, which has catapulted them. I mean, this is the best recruiting class by the numbers, whether you go for average rating, whether you go for total points in the 247 system. This is the best one that they're going to have. And the same offseason that they lost Chad Bowden, which was like the white whale for USC, and Notre Dame just kept humming. Like that to me shows a lot about, Marcus Freeman, his vision and his decision-making. It didn't have to go like this. That's another reason why Notre Dame wins the offseason, when really they had a lot of opportunities to really mess it up, and they didn't do it.
Let's stay on the recruiting point, because I remember in February and honestly March as well, there was just nothing happening for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail. Like there wasn't even smoke. There weren't even rumors for people to get excited about. And then really everything started to change in April. They get Ebenezer Iwatade. They ultimately get Rodney Dunham. They get that string of commitments, and then it slows down a little bit. And then June and July rolls around, and it is quite possibly the greatest recruiting stretch for Notre Dame in my lifetime. There's a bunch of different things you could point to, like the reason why Notre Dame is having a bunch of success. NIL is certainly a part of it. The trip to the national championship, the way that the staff is sort of like restructured, changed their priorities and all of that. But what do you think flipped the switch going all the way back to the spring, which created this domino effect that has catapulted Notre Dame to one of the top 5 classes in the country?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's the recruiting department getting all their ducks in a row with Carter Allman, with Mike Martin as well. And then that staff, like they brought in Myron Tagovailoa-Mosa, like they brought him in. They made a couple of other hires that they got that recruiting office set up, and they got their recruiting operation set up. And they obviously needed that, right? Because as soon as, you may recall Notre Dame kind of put out the press release where it was, there were like 9 of them, I think, that they all kind of announced, like, this is our team, our recruiting team, and our management team. Right after that happened, things started to kind of flip and things started to change. So that was one piece of it. The other piece of it is Pete Bavacqua was a serious guy, and Notre Dame has made the decision that they're not, that they are going to be competitors in the NIL space in a way that they haven't before. They will pay what it takes, and they will pay at the top for players to come to Notre Dame, right? It's legal now, right? Like everyone kind of knows it's part of college football, and they've made a decision. And by the way, you're seeing this kind of across the country with some of these other schools, like USC, for example. They've kind of made the decision too. And I think that the same thing with USC and Notre Dame is they, in the beginning, weren't sure how to navigate this space, because they both they didn't want to get into kind of that funny money that you saw with the SEC and things like that. They didn't want to do that. They were hesitant to get into that space. Now that they are both knowing what's legal, knowing what they're allowed to do and how they're able to structure things, they became major players in the NIL game. That's been a major difference. I mean, look, you don't close on all of these players and you're not an NIL program. You know what I mean? You just don't. Like, that doesn't happen in college football. And I don't think there's any coincidence. Like, now, look, it doesn't mean that that Carter Allman's not doing a great job. It doesn't mean that Mike Martin's not doing a great job. It doesn't mean that Marcus Freeman isn't doing a great job. What I'm saying is, now that Notre Dame has leveled the playing field that way, they become much more powerful in the recruiting space and the NL space than they were before.
True. And it's clear they have a plan, right?
Yeah.
They're not just throwing that money around to anyone who will take it. They have spent a long time scouting, evaluating. They pick their guys who they're going to go after intensely, and then they had them all on campus that one weekend back. I think it was June 13th through the 15th. They were all on campus. They were all together, and it was very clear, like, You guys are a top priority. The next weekend, they had the rest of the guys who maybe couldn't make it that first weekend. So, yes, they are throwing big money around, but it's the guys who they have spent the most time building those relationships. And I think that's a credit to Carter Allman and the whole staff. We should point out, by the way, that Carter Allman, at one point, Wisconsin was looking at him to become their general manager. He stuck around. Now, does help that he went to Notre Dame. His whole family went to Notre Dame as well. So
for sure,
might have been a little bit of a hometown discount there, but he is very integral to this recruiting class. And right now, the Irish have built a top 5 class on paper. They are currently ranked 5th in the 24/7 Sports Composite. They're hoping to land top target Elijah Golden in a little over a week. I think he's pretty much the last guy left on their board. So let's say Golden ends up being the final addition. That would bring the class to 27 total commits, 20 of which are blue chip prospects, and 3 are considered 5 stars on the composite. When you look at this group as a whole, there's a bunch of different things we could talk about here, the depth, the different positions, the strengths and weaknesses. But what is your biggest takeaway when you look at Notre Dame's class of 2026?
My biggest takeaway is the caliber of player that they were able to land in a short amount of time, and that were major targets for some of the biggest universities in the nation, right? Beating Caden Finley. I don't care what he's ranked. Rank him whatever you want. He was Texas's number 1 target, and Notre Dame won that recruitment. You look at Joey O'Brien. He was Oregon's number 1 target. He was Penn State's number 1 target. Notre Dame won that recruitment. Rodney Dunham is everyone's number 1 target at defensive end. Notre Dame won that recruitment. Kari Adams, same. Penn State, Oregon. When is Notre Dame winning recruiting battles for kids who are visiting Oregon? It used to be that, he's going to Oregon, he's visiting Oregon. Forget it. He's not a Notre Dame. He's not a Notre Dame kid. He's not a Notre Dame fit. But Notre Dame is winning these recruitments. Look at Javion Osborne. He's Texas. He's Michigan. Jaywan Sider comes in. He's Notre Dame, and he's Notre Dame's biggest recruiter. Ian Premer. He was. This was not going to happen. In the past, Notre Dame loses that recruitment 10 times out of 10. He's in Notre Dame's class. Like Grayson McKeel, same thing. He's Penn State's number 1 target. Rank them where you want. It's not up to me to rank people. All I know is that these are the number 1 targets for the biggest schools that Notre Dame is after, and Notre Dame is able to land these players. And by the way, and Jamie and I have talked about this a ton too, it's not so much that Notre Dame's landing them. It's like these are the teams that Notre Dame has to beat to win national championships. Notre Dame has to beat Oregon at some point in the playoffs. Notre Dame beat Penn State last year. You got to win these recruitments because you're playing them all the time, and you're playing them in the must-win games. That to me is the big thing. Notre Dame's always been very good at finding the quote unquote diamonds in the rough, but now they're taking the top dogs from the top dogs. And that's a major change to me. So that's probably my biggest takeaway from this class. It's not so much the caliber of players, which they are very, very good, kind of across the board. Not to go into each individual player, but I really like what they've done with their class and how they've kind of built out the class with what the needs are on the actual team. But to go head to head with these schools, Elijah Golden, Alabama, Georgia, Miami, right? You're beating Alabama and Miami for an interior defensive lineman. Should he commit to Notre Dame? It just doesn't happen that often. And they did it with 3 other guys.
When Greg comes back, we're going to break down how the injuries to Charles Jagasaw and Jordan Botelho will impact the Irish this season. Plus, we'll pick who will be the most impactful transfer addition. But before we do, I want to tell you about Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. My favorite part is you can see the view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you'll be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. There was nothing but good news for a long stretch there because Notre Dame was dominating on the recruiting trail. They were getting commitments from every single guy that they wanted. And finally, the first thing that didn't go Notre Dame's way was when Charles Jagasaw broke his arm the 4th of July weekend. And you're like, okay, kind of, had to come back down to earth for a little bit there. But that is not the only offseason injury that Notre Dame has had to deal with. Jordan Botelho suffered another injury this offseason. He was not with the team, but he tore his pec. So those are two players who Notre Dame was going to count on this season. So how does it affect your expectations for Notre Dame this season?
Well, regarding Botelho, I think it's for both players, but for Botelho, it's just unfortunate. It's unlucky, right? Like he's going into his last season with Notre Dame. He's one who could have left. I mean, there were strong.
We thought he was going to leave. Thought he was going to leave.
There were strong indications that he was going to head into the portal, and he didn't. He ends up hurting himself. The good news is that he seems to be ahead of schedule. At the first opening practice, he was in pads. He was not in pads, but he was dressed. He had a helmet on. He was doing drills. He was hitting the sled. He's locking out on the sled. So he appears to be, a lot further along than we previously thought he would be at this time, which is good because the nice thing for what Notre Dame wants to do is, you can come back in week 4 and get 10 plus games. If Notre Dame is ascending into the playoffs like they did last year, that's great for him. With Charles Jagasaw, I think, obviously it's unfortunate for him because this is the second year now in the offseason where he suffered a major injury to a part of his upper body. For the team, it takes away a little bit of that upside, I think, or the perceived upside, because he's, I would have ranked him in Notre Dame's at least top 10 players, if not
put
top
him at
5.
3.
Yeah, he was going to be a very, very high level player for Notre Dame. Fortunately, Notre Dame has been high on Sullivan Absher for a very long time. They've always liked him, so that's good. They do have a backup there who Notre Dame believes in and feels like can be a good football player. Chances are he doesn't have the upside as Charles Jagasaw, and that hurts the overall trajectory of the offensive line. Which isn't to say they can't be a good offensive line. They started Sam Pendleton at guard at Texas A&M last year, and he ended up getting replaced halfway through the season, So, and I think Sullivan Absher is going to be a better player than Sam Pendleton. So, I think the team can figure it out. It's unfortunate for Charles Jagasaw, more so, and especially with Jordan Botelho. Notre Dame has very good options at defensive end. They should be able to get after the passer with a multitude of players there, whether it be Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, Junior Tulihalamaka, right? Now, that's 4 guys who have played a ton of football. And you're not going to play all of them at the same time. Jordan Botelho is the 5th guy there, right? So they have options there. It's unfortunate for him because he looked so good last year. But hopefully he can come back sooner than we think. He looked good on the opening day of practice.
This is a great segue into the last thing I want to talk about, and that is the transfer portal. Because one of the first things that crossed my mind when Jagasaw went down was, well, it would have been nice if Rocco Spindler or Pat Coogan decided to stay. Now, I totally understand why those guys left because they were not going to start unless something like this happened, and you can't count on that, especially going into your final season of eligibility in college football. So I think at the time when they left, you're like, that's a bummer. I get it, right? But those are the 2 main transfer defections that really matter. Steve Angeli went to Syracuse, Sam Pendleton went to Tennessee. Neither one of those moves were a big surprise. Notre Dame was able to keep all the running backs like we already talked about, and then they went into the transfer portal, and they were very smart with how they approached it. They didn't have to go out there and get a quarterback, but they filled some gaps. Like they added Malachi Fields, they added Will Pauling on defense, they added a guy like Devontae Smith and some nice supplemental pieces as well. So if you had to pick one portal addition to make the biggest impact this fall, who would it be?
It's probably between Malachi Fields and Devontae Smith, I think, because they are going to probably receive the most snaps. I will say, I don't want to be wishful thinking. I think the correct answer is Devontae Smith. I feel like Malachi Fields is a little bit of wishful thinking there. I just haven't seen him enough And Devontae Smith is playing nickel for Alabama, and I have tremendous respect for what Alabama does coverage wise. So I feel like he's very ready to compete at a high level for Notre Dame in their secondary. Plus, I think he gives them a lot of versatility too, because he played some safety as well. So, I think people view him as kind of a Carson Hobbs blocker. I don't know that that's true. I think they can both be on the field at the same time in some dime packages. So I think that's very interesting to me. And Marcus Freeman dropped a little tidbit on Devontae Smith in the opening press conference when he said he recruited him at Cincinnati. So there's an affinity there that Marcus Freeman has for Devontae Smith that I think plays. I could see it being Malachi Fields. I just kind of wonder, who had a big catch on the first day. Tyler is our guy, Micah Gilbert. I pumped him up on the spring preview, and then he broke his hand in the first drill. He had a 65-yard catch on the opening day of practice. So I think that he could be a little bit more of a factor for Notre Dame receiving than I think that could affect the way that Malachi Fields is on Notre Dame's offense. So that's something. I don't know that that's going to be the case for Devontae Smith. So I'm going to say that a little under the radar guy, Ty Washington at tight end. There's a world in there where he's the guy who gets the second most snaps at tight end. There's some injuries. There's injuries at tight end. We expect a lot from Eli Raridan, but Kevin Ballman, I think, Ty Washington, is he going to be a better player than Jack Larson? Is he going to be a better player than Kevin Ballman? Is he going to be a better player than, Cooper Flanagan's hurt, right? So then it's just James Flanagan, the other freshman tight end. I think Ty Washington could be another radar guy as well.
I hear you on Ty Washington. I'm hoping that it's Malachi Fields. I really think he could be a Miles Boykin type player. But are we sleeping on Will Pauling?
Maybe. The thing with Will Pauling is the path to the field is tough because they like phase on. They like phase on, and obviously they like Greathouse, right? So that's the part where it's like, man, if I thought his snaps were like frontline snaps, then I would feel a little bit differently about it. But I don't know that that's true. I mean, there would have to be an injury, right? And I don't want to speculate on that. So that's the thing. The path to the field to him is a little bit unclear. But from an impact standpoint, he could have a pretty big impact. He could win a game for Notre Dame.
My thinking there is basically, especially at the beginning of the season when, it's either going to be Carr or Minchie's first start or a couple of starts, like they're going to want to keep things easy for him. And Will Pauling is a great little safety net out there who is not running downfield. He can run routes in the flat and just get open and make for easy throws for the quarterback. So he is someone who I'm keeping an eye on. And I'm also keeping an eye on Noah Burnett because I'm a little nervous about the kicking situation at Notre Dame. And I don't know, maybe it's just like looking at what he did last year for North Carolina. I know he had a really good year in 2023, but then in the spring game, I was like, look, I know he's coming off an injury, but some of those kicks were gross. And in his first practice, he was a little bit inconsistent. So if we're talking strictly impact in big moments, I think Noah Burnett could have a huge impact, good or bad, on the team this fall.
And Marty Biaggi, I trust on that. I'm gonna believe in him. He's a former kicker. I think he'll get it figured out.
All right. That's a great note to end on. Greg, before we let you go, tell the people where they can find you.
Hit and Hustle with Irish Sports Daily on YouTube. You can search us there. There's going to be a lot of shows this year. We might be moving to 7 days a week, Tyler. We might be moving to 7 days a week. We got to hit and we got to hustle on the on the YouTubes. So we're gonna be there a lot. Find us at irishsportsdaily.com as well. There's a lot of content going up there. Find me on Twitter at Greg2126. That's where my breakdowns go. That's where you can find our stuff.
Be sure to go check out Greg's stuff. As a matter of fact, you might find me in the comments, which is I was there today, but we'll call it there. Greg, thanks so much for taking the time, man. We'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir.
That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thank you so much for tuning in and making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, the like button, leave a rating or review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. It really helps more Notre Dame fans find the show. I'm going to be back tomorrow morning to break down the ceiling and the floor for this Notre Dame team in 2025. Like, what's the best case scenario and what's the worst? Tune in tomorrow to find out. I'll see you then.